Welcome to Full Steam Ahead. We're going to talk about getting the most out of your Steam launch. This will be a good starting point for those that are currently working on a game that they're planning to launch on Steam, or um, somebody who's just thinking about putting their game out on Steam, anything like that. So I am Mike Stumhofer. I'm the founder of Hoff Studios, which is an indie studio here in Atlanta. My Twitter handle is MikeST34 if you want to follow me on there. I'm a developer and publisher of Depth of Extinction, which launched on Steam in 2018. And I am the publisher of another game called Polyroll that launched on Steam in 2019. It was developed by Spicy Euro and Shiny Dolphin. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about some terminology that you might not be familiar with, especially if you're not an independent developer who's publishing to Steam or interested in publishing to Steam. So um, these are the terms we'll talk about. The first one is wish lists. They want you to add their game to your wish list. What does that mean? Wish list is just a list of games on Steam that you will get an email about when they launch or go on a discount. So it's a pretty important way of driving traffic, especially for launch day and trying to get sales for launch day. The next one is followers. So that is pretty big metric on Steam. You can't see how many wish lists a game has, but you can see how many followers it has. And we'll talk a little more about this later. Early access. This is a way to launch your game on Steam before it's finished. So you can actually start making money and getting feedback on your game, but the buyers know, or supposed to know, that it's not a completed game. Key art, that is the art that buyers see at the top of your page or on various places throughout Steam. We'll talk more about this later. The algorithm, when people talk about the algorithm, they're really talking about how is your game shown on Steam in various places. It's the new and trending list on the Steam homepage. And to some degree, the algorithm controls the organic traffic that your game is going to get from Steam. Next thing we're going to talk about is the box lightener number. Now, this may be a term you haven't heard before, but basically it's the thing on Steam where people look at the number of reviews and then they have a number they multiply by to try to figure out how many units this game has sold. And, there have been a lot of numbers that have gone around. Most people I know used to use like 75 or 50 or something like that, or 100. But I'll talk about what maybe that is now. So the first thing that you need to know about Steam is that there's a lot of things that affect your launch and how well your game does at launch. So there's things you can control, like making a good game, which, obviously we're all trying to make a good game, but that is something you can control to some extent. Another thing is pick a good genre. Have a compelling key art. Have a good description for your game. Choose the right tags that tell players about your game. Set the right price. Then there are some things that you really can't control, but you can kind of influence these things in different ways. Wishlist and followers, we mentioned that before. Wishlist conversion, now this is how many people that are on your wishlist actually buy the game. Organic sales, so this would be sales that come directly from Steam. Influencers, so if a streamer decides to play your game, to some extent you can't control that, but there are some ways you can kind of help yourself. So the first thing we'll talk about is, picking that good genre and making that good game. Before you get started trying to sell your game, most of the decision has already been made about whether it will do well just because of what kind of game it is. Unfortunately, there are some genres that just aren't that viable on Steam, so it's good to kind of be aware of this and so set your expectations correctly. This was a chart that was on Chris Zukowski's blog, and I'll talk about Chris a little bit later on. This is the number of released games and then the median earnings. So the number of games is the blue bars, and the earnings is the red line. So you can see kind of as the genre saturation goes up, the earnings go down. So like puzzle and platformer are genres on Steam where there's a lot of games, but the average game doesn't make very much money. So let's talk about the key art. We mentioned that before. Here's some examples of Spelunky 2 and basically the art that appears on top of your Steam page. It's used all over the place on Steam. There's a bunch of different formats for the art depending on where it's located. So on the top here is what we call the small capsule. This is in places where it's very small, usually just has the logo. Then this is kind of the larger capsule here that can be like on the home page or on different tag pages and so forth. And then this is the main capsule that appears on your actual page of your game. So the first thing you need to realize about this is that it's important. It's very important to spend some time on your capsule. If it's bad, no one's going to click on it and no one's going to see your game. That's going to influence your organic traffic. So that's one of the things we were talking about. Like, you can't control how often Steam shows this to people, but you can control that when they do show it to someone, that it looks as good as possible and that it sends the right signals. So that's the thing you have to realize, is that there are signals within your genre, so it's very good to actually go and look at the different games in your genre that are similar to your game to kind of see like what are the trends, colors, various signals that appear in the key art that tell you things about how people are going to view this key art and just make a decision about whether to click on your game. Probably the best strategy that I know of is take a look at the best-selling game in the genre that you're in and try to do something very similar to that. That is probably the smartest thing that you can do. Also, pay someone to do this. If you're not a graphic designer, or even if you are, it might be good to go ahead and get somebody else involved to do the key art for you that has experience making this sort of thing. And another strategy that I've found is that you can actually like screen capture a list of games on Steam, like some of the lists with the small capsules and the lists where you see like a bunch of large capsules together, and like put your game's capsule on there and then show it to people and see what they think. Would they pick your game out to click on? I mean, it's a pretty easy way to test how effective your capsule is even just looking at it yourself. Maybe you can tell what it's going to look like. So, try to be a little self-critical here. Don't just think that I made a logo and I put it up there and now I'm done with this. It's just a task. It's not just a task that you need to complete. It's really a core element of marketing your game. Let's talk about other assets for your page. First, you're going to need to pick out a few screenshots when you put up your Steam page. Here's a screenshot from XCOM. I'd recommend picking a screenshot that's action-oriented. You're going to want to show people about your game. I would not try to pick a screenshot that shows too much, though. You're definitely going to want to try to show a single thing if possible, because obviously it's a static image. There's only so much you can show. The other thing is show the UI. Steam players really want to see the UI. I think there's a temptation to want to hide the UI to better show off like the graphics in the game or the art or whatever it is, depending on the type of game. But I think it's important to really have the screenshot illustrate exactly what the game is about and give a sense to the player of how the game will play, and the UI is a great way to do that. The other thing to talk about is the trailer. You also have to have a trailer when you put up your Steam page. You'd be surprised how hard this is to do. Putting together a good trailer is very difficult. Personally, I would say unless you're a really well-known studio, there's no reason to put a splash logo up. If you put one up, very quick, very fast, 2 seconds maybe. Don't have this 10-second logo up there. You don't want to wait, make your watcher wait 10 seconds to see the action. Most people only watch a trailer for about 10 seconds. One other thing I will mention is that most Steam players don't even look at the trailers, they just look at the screenshots. So if you're, you know, unsure about where to put your time, I would definitely put your time into the screenshots. The trailer is important because some people will look at it and make a decision based on it, but the screenshots are the most important thing. Um, the other detail in the trailer is you do not want to go over 1 minute unless you really have something very important to tell the player in more than 1 minute. I also wouldn't go for more than one trailer unless like you have like if you're doing an update that has like some significant new content that necessitates a new trailer, that's probably a good reason to do it. Or if you like one of the things we did on Polyroll was Justin's who's Spicy Euro did a commercial. He's a big video guy, and he made a really awesome commercial. That's a great second trailer to have. But if you're not going to do something that really adds a lot of value, I would just stick with one because most people are really wanting to see the screenshots, as I mentioned. So some other considerations for your page. I mean, most people just put together a feature list. But one thing that I would say is, and again, this is another thing from Chris's blog, that it's better to think in terms of benefits to the player rather than just features. So, as you know, this is something that he said, benefits are just a feature wrapped in context. Take your list of features, say so what, and then tell a story about each feature, and that should be interesting enough that someone will want to repeat that story to someone else. I thought that was a good way to say it. You've got to make sure that you have updates and announcements. If people go to your page and they don't see any announcements on the page, they're going to assume the game is dead or that there's nothing interesting about it. It's another thing that Steam puts on the page that shows that there's something interesting going on. You know, you don't. I wouldn't overuse the announcements, but at least posting something, especially when your game's unreleased, it's a good way to get in front of people that are followers. Like this would show up in their news feed on Steam, and you can, you know, tell them about the progress your game is making. Tell them about the latest feature or benefit that you have implemented. If you have screenshots and things like that, or GIFs, or you did a YouTube video, anything like that would be a good thing to post. There's another element that Steam has added recently, which is allowing developers to stream. It's actually fairly easy to do streaming on your page, and it looks really nice, and you can see how many people are viewing it, and it's a really good way to kind of show people what's going on with your game and help people make that decision to buy. The other thing you should do is make sure that your page doesn't exceed 10 megabytes. Steam allows you to put GIFs on the page, and so it's very tempting to maybe overdo that, maybe put a massive GIF on the page. But this isn't like a hard and fast rule, but the Steamworks YouTube video that they did recently said that this is just good practice to just keep people from clicking through to the next game when they're in their queue, in the discovery queue, and they don't want to wait for a game to load. But it's pretty easy to check this out. If you're in Chrome, you can open up the developer tools, load the page, and it'll show you. You may have to click around a little bit to find it, but it's not too hard to find. Use the special sections on Steam. If you're not familiar with what I mean by special sections, you'll notice sometimes people can create a wish list, a custom wish list image, and put that in a special section, or an image asking people to join their Discord, or adding reviews to your Steam store description, or letting people know that it supports full controller or something like that. So there's a lot of different things that Steam will allow you to do, and they give a little more context about the game to the potential buyer. The other thing is to go and spend a little time getting your forum set up. You know, a lot of times players want to go and give you feedback, but you might have to guide them a little bit. So it's good to set up a few pinned forum topics, like, you know, a place to report bugs, a place to give feedback, a place for whatever it is that you think you want to do. Or, you know, if you have like announcements are a good place to put important information every once in a while. If you have things that you're posting more often, forums are another good place to put that. So you could have a new forum topic that you pin that maybe you're going to post to every day with some little detail about your game, but you don't want to spam announcements. There's quite a lot of people are going to look at your page and then go to the forum, so it's a good way to spend some time. Another important thing on your Steam page are tags. Tags are really super important on Steam. They're one of the most important elements of your page. You can see them right at the very top. There's a list that says popular user-defined tags. So this is Spelunky 2, 2D platformer, action roguelike, permadeath. There's a little plus where you can see the full, like the list of tags. That's the top 20 tags. Tags are voted on by users. You can go check this out on Steam and see how it works. But this is a really important thing because it signals to the buyer what kind of genre this is. And buyers know their favorite genre, and they immediately, like the first thing they want to see is this game a game that I'm going to like? That's what they're trying to figure out when they're looking at your Steam page. Or let's say not that am I going to like it, but is it possible I might like it? So they're going to compare it to genres they enjoy and decide if this is something that's for them. So definitely go and take a look at similar games. Just like with the key art, you want to look at tags as well and decide what tags to put on your game. So you can actually apply them directly. If you log into Steam with your developer account, you can just add them through the regular tag interface. Or Steamworks now has a tag wizard in the back end that you can use to go and add the tags. I would definitely, I think they recommend only 5. I recommend that you pick 20 tags out and that you put 20 tags in. And if you don't like a tag, you can actually go in here and have it removed by flagging it. So when you hover over a tag, there's going to be a little flag on there, and you can, with the developer account that you use to set up your Steamworks, you can go in and have a tag removed. So if you don't like that tag, take it off. For instance, a tag that is somewhat useless is indie. That tag doesn't help. That tag is too general. It doesn't give anyone any context about what type of game this is. Well, I guess it just gives some context, but it doesn't help me as a buyer figure out what kind of game this is and whether I want to buy it or not. So I would suggest just removing that tag. The other thing is to figure out how are you going to price your game. So one thing you might, if you do a little research into pricing an indie game, you'll find that there are price tiers out there. Price tiers just mean that buyers sort of look at a game or games in a particular price range. All of those about the same price. So for instance, like a $0 to $4.99, that's kind of like in one tier. I think $5 to $9.99. $10 to $14.99, $15 to $19.99. They're in about $5 increments. I mean, I think as you go up higher, it might the increment might increase to some extent. But like from a buyer perspective, like there's not really much difference between an $11.99 game and a $14.99 game. So if you're going to price your game inside one of those tiers, if you feel like that's the right price for your game, then you might as well go maybe on the higher end and pick, for instance, if you're going to say, I think $11.99 is a good price. Well, you're probably not going to do a whole lot worse pricing at $14.99, except that you will make more money. So it's probably smart to just do that. So most players know the price for their genre. Like they know what they paid for other similar looking games. So a higher or lower price than what the buyer perceives as the average is going to send some kind of a signal. A higher price tells me that it's higher quality, lower price, lower quality, or something, some issue with the game potentially. So make sure that you know what the average games are out there and the highs and lows in your genre. And then you're going to want to compare a few different things. The playtime, actually, you can get this from a website called How Long to Beat. I've got an example here from Spelunky, but it's pretty easy to go in and research. People will post like, how long did it take them to beat a game? And, once it's got a certain number of people posting about it, it can kind of give an average. Um, I think art style and quality are a little bit subjective, obviously, but, you probably want to, if your game's in pixel art, you probably want to compare it to other pixel art. You need to be somewhat critical of your game and say, okay, is it as good as this other game from a pixel art standpoint? Like, I think it's good, but is your average buyer going to agree? I think with overall quality and uniqueness, you need to really know the games in your genre, so it's good to play them all and have an idea of like, kind of be a little critical again of your game and say, okay, is my game as good as this game? Like if I'm making a roguelike 2D platformer style game, obviously people will probably compare it to Spelunky and Spelunky 2. And Spelunky players buy this game, are they going to be disappointed in this game? Or are they going to think, oh, this is awesome? So if you think they're going to be disappointed, well, this is a one way to send a signal that this game isn't quite as good as Spelunky is to price it lower than Spelunky. If you think people, like your game is better than Spelunky, then price it higher than Spelunky. This is, these are how you make these kind of decisions. You don't have to make a perfect decision, but this is just kind of an overall guideline. The other thing I've noticed is that story-driven games tend to price a little bit higher than like roguelike games. So just, keep that in mind. You'll probably figure that out when you're looking at genres. But there are some game genres that, that can support roguelike mechanic or story-driven games. So you may want to factor that in when you're looking at the pricing. Just make sure you're taking that into consideration. You've set a price. Now you're going to try to estimate the sales, right? You're going to want to say, oh, okay, how many units will I sell? So I'm going to look at other games and I'm going to try to estimate, well, how many units did they sell? And this is the Boxleitner number. We mentioned this before. And this number has changed a lot over the years. Like when I first started looking at this topic back in like 2015 and 2016, most people kind of said like 75 or 80 was the number. So, if a game had 100 or let's say 1,000 reviews on Steam, you multiply that by 80, so you'd estimate there's 80,000 owners of that game. And then the obvious thing is to think, oh, that game is $10, so 80,000 times $10 is $800,000. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be rich if I make that game. But the reality is that number can vary quite a bit, that Boxleitner number. It could be 10 or it could be 200 for this particular game. And it's really hard to know. And the other thing is you have to realize very few of those units are going to move at the high price. So you're going to want to do a little bit more research and like figure out, first of all, how long has this game been on the market and how much discounting have they done. There's quite a few sites where you can see this data. One of them is thereanydeal.com, which can show you quite a few charts and interesting pieces of information about pricing and discounting and timeline and so forth, so you can see how long a game's been on the market, how often are they doing discounts. Steam will allow you to do a discount about every 6 weeks, and then there's, I think, 3 or 4 kind of special sales throughout the year. So you basically have somewhere between 8 and 10 discount opportunities a year for your game. And I think the games can be on sale max of 2 weeks. So that means there's probably anywhere from like 16 to 20 weeks a year out of 52. So like 40% of the year, this game could be on discount potentially. So it's hard to really know how much money people have made. And the other thing is those numbers don't take into account things like returns and chargebacks and stuff. I've found that returns can be significant on Steam. My games, it varies. So, most of the time it's, I would say, under 10%, but plenty of games have more than 10%. And some games have less than 5%. it just depends. So Steam will let you return a game that you played less than 2 hours, no questions asked, basically. And so a lot of buyers will do this. I say a lot. It's probably like some buyers do this and do it kind of like a demo. So essentially, Steam lets every game have a demo. It's just most people don't realize this is the case, and so they're buying is kind of a nerve-wracking experience for them. So if you followed any indie developers on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere like that, you're bound to see calls for wishlist my game. This is so common that everyone really knows what wish lists are. I mean, I know I talked about what they are before, but everybody knows what they are at this point, and everyone thinks that they are really the key to success on Steam. And I guess they are in a lot of respects. Well, first thing you need to know about wish lists is they're not public. The only way you're going to know how many wish lists a game has is if a developer tells you. This is not information that you can just go see anywhere. But there is another Steam stat that is public, and that's the followers. I mentioned this earlier, and there's it's possible to see the follower count on Steam pretty easily. You can go just find community groups on the Steam page, and it'll tell you how many people have joined the community group. This is followers. If you actually take a look at steamdb.info, which is a great site for looking at a lot of other information aside from just followers, but they actually have started tracking followers since about mid 2019. He tracks them daily, so you can get an idea. You can see this chart here. This can tell you a lot about what's going on with the game, like how many followers it has. And you can actually, there's some calculations out there that will help you kind of guess how many wish lists they are. So most people would say that wish lists are about followers times 4 or 5. So, I usually say, 5 is probably a good round number. If you want to be very conservative, you could say 4. But this will give you some idea about how many followers how many wish lists they have. Obviously, this is not perfect. This is based on an average that was done by some indie devs, shared their info, and put this information together. The thing that makes wish lists really interesting stat is that you can use them to estimate what your day one sales will be. Another developer named Jake Burkett, and we'll talk about him later. I'll share his Twitter handle with you, but he called for data from a bunch of indie developers. I think he got about 80 responses, and he kind of used this to build out a formula for estimating your day one sales. So he said day one sales will approximately equal wish lists at launch times 0.5. Now, it's interesting info. So that means if you have, according to him, on average, if you have 1,000 wish lists at launch, you will sell 500 copies your first day. Wow, that sounds great, right? But what does that mean? So this doesn't mean that half of your wish lists are going to convert on the first day. This is taking into account the effect that wish lists will have on organic sales. So what generally happens on Steam is there's a snowball effect where the purchases on the first day will move you up, or a high number of purchases on the first day will move you up in the algorithm, and then give you more organic traffic, which then results in more wish lists, more purchases, and if everything goes really well, this is about what you end up with. The real truth is that this is a pretty wide range. If you look at his data set, it was anywhere from like 0.05 to like 0.8 or something like that. So it was a pretty big range. This was really the median number was 0.5. So I think he did a launch of his game right after that and ended up at 0.45. So that's pretty good. I think if you do end up with a 0.5 number at launch, you did very well. So wish lists only have a couple of impacts, or let's say a few impacts in the store. They impact the popular upcoming list that's on the homepage. There's the top wish listed page on Steam, and also it obviously impacts your sales on your first day and at your discounts, because those are the people that are getting emails. So the more wish lists that you have, the more people are going to know that your game is on sale, so the more people are going to buy it. The next thing we need to talk about is how do you get wish lists? The first thing, the first piece of advice that I would give anybody is to get your Steam page up early. I mean, ideally, you want your Steam page up collecting wish lists for 12 to 18 months at least before you launch your game. Wish lists kind of come in a slow trickle. You don't just get 1,000 on the first day. You're going to find that you will get some the first day, and that will probably be your best day initially. But then you will have to tie those into other things. So like in your marketing, you need to really focus your marketing around a clear call to action, which is wish list my game. And that's why I said earlier, you hear a lot of people say wish list my game. That's a very clear call to action. So if you're setting up a mailing list and you send an email out to your subscribers, put a wish list button in there. If you're posting to Twitter, ask people to wish list your game. Don't be afraid to do that. If you're at a convention and you're talking to people about your game, ask them to put it on their wish list on Steam. You can post on Screenshot Saturday on Twitter. You can kind of identify some subreddits that you think will like your game, but you have to post respectfully. Definitely, it's hard to post a lot on Reddit. Once you do it a little bit, you'll kind of figure this out that Reddit is very community driven. So you have to participate in the community. Otherwise, people will not upvote your posts. You'll be, have your posts removed for spam, things like that. The other thing I think is important in 2020, and in the last few years, it's increases in importance is using Discord. I think Discord is one of the most important things that you can do to promote your game, and also kind of build a community around your game. Yeah, I guess that's really the thing that you have to do now. It used to be that you were more like shouting into the void. Now it's like you have to build this community, and you really need to focus on getting to know your players and letting your players get to know you and know who you are. And so I think it's important. That's an important way to do that. The forums on Steam and Discord are like the two ways that you're going to interact the most with people. So make sure that you are focused on those. You can also run ads. I think Facebook ads are okay. You kind of have to do some calculations though to like figure it out. So you may want to run some tests and kind of see how it goes. And it may a lot of cases depend on various factors that you won't know ahead of time, like what is your conversion percentage from wish lists. So conversion percentage just means, and Steam shows you this in their back-end stats tool, but conversion percentage means that what percentage of people from your wish list actually bought your game. And I think you could even go one step higher and say what percentage of people that looked at my Steam page put it on their wish list. So these are the numbers that I always look at, is like try to measure, if I got 1,000 views on my page, on my Steam page, and 100 wish lists, okay, that's 10%. In reality, it's not going to be quite that high, but that's actually a number that you can shoot for. Is like 10%. So Facebook ads usually bill you based on the click-through. So one of the things that the way you can sort of calculate whether a Facebook ad is going to be worth it is like, how much does it cost me for a click-through? And a click-through equals one visit on the page. And if I have 10% of those people wish list, and then 10% of those wish listers buy, now I can sort of make a calculation to say, okay, how much is it worth to me to run a Facebook ad if all those things are true? If it's 10% of the people who click wish list, then 10% of them buy, then I can kind of roughly figure that out. I'll give you one other tip on Facebook ads. You've got to really make sure that you target correctly. I target people who like Steam. So actually, Steam has a Facebook page, and if they liked it, then they probably use Steam. And then Also, I would only do desktop. I would not allow my ads to be served to mobile. I don't think that majority of people are logged into Steam on mobile, so that would get you a view, but with 0% chance of wishlisting probably. So, or much lower chance to wishlist. I would say um, stick to desktop. People will be logged into Steam. You'll have a much better chance of getting a wish list out of that click than otherwise. Um, I've heard some people say that they've had good results from Reddit ads. I have not tried those myself, but it may be something that's worth trying for the right game. I would say, you know, also you could try Twitter ads as an option. I've tried that a little bit. Twitter ads tend to burn pretty quick. So like if you say I want to do $5 a day or something on your Twitter ads, that $5 will be gone in like 2 seconds. They don't do a good job of um, I don't know if their targeting is not good or maybe I didn't use it correctly or something, but that was my experience. And Facebook, it was very easy to set up the targeting effectively. Now, I've heard other people mention other sites like Giphy or Imager. Um, your mileage may vary with those. There are other sites that are social and do get a lot of visitors, so it's possible they could work for you. You may have to spend some time though getting to know those sites, and each one of these sites is sort of different, has sort of a different community that operates in a different way, and is used to, and it's going to have like a different sort of reaction to different things. So it's going to take some time to figure that out for you. Another key aspect of promoting your game is reaching out to press and streamers. The first thing you need to do is figure out how to reach out. So how are you going to get email addresses? One of the things that I do is I use a browser plugin called Hunter to harvest emails for various press sites. It's pretty easy to do. You find a site that's written an article about a game that's maybe similar to yours or a site that you like. I mean, a lot of writers will just have their email address right on there, but many won't, especially smaller sites. So it's a lot of times better for smaller games like we're doing to try to pitch to smaller sites. And a great way to do it is Hunter. So what Hunter does is it collects email addresses for domains and then puts them in a database. It's free. You don't have to pay for it. I think there is like an upgrade version, but to do what we're talking about, it's free. YouTubers, you can usually get their email address directly from the About page on YouTube. YouTube's making this a little bit more difficult than they used to. You've got to do a bunch of CAPTCHAs to get the email, and then they're also limiting you to 10 emails a day. It's not that big a deal. Generally, what I do is I will find, like search for games, make a list of games that are similar to my game, search for them on YouTube, and start putting all of the YouTubers in a spreadsheet who did a video about the game. And I'll put in what their name is, the game they played, and the link to their page, and then also their email address if I can get it. And it may take me a little while, especially since YouTube, like I said, limits you to 10 a day. It may take you a little while to get the emails, but eventually you can get as many as you want. I mean, if you spend a day on this, it's easy to get 100 emails to send out. So then with that data, you would write a mail merge. I use a tool called Yet Another Mail Merge. So with that spreadsheet and a Gmail email, I can pretty easily write a custom email to pitch my game to those YouTubers. Twitch streamers are a little more difficult to get the email address of. Many have it on the page. You can also check their Twitter. Most of them have a link to their Twitter, and a lot of them will put the email there. But some you just won't be able to get. So I would, stick to what we would call low-hanging fruit here. Get the emails you can, and then do a mail merge. Now, writing your email is an art in and of itself. Writing a good subject line, a good pitch email. The one tip that I'm going to give you, send a key. Send a Steam key. People will talk all the time about how, oh, there's all this piracy, people stealing keys. I don't want to send keys out. Send a key to everybody. It's not that big a deal. You can get 1,000 keys pretty quick on Steam. It's more keys than you'll need. Um, so what if a few of them end up in the hands of pirates or something like that? Not a big deal. Piracy is not something you need to worry about. The advantage of sending a key right away is they don't have to email you and ask you for a key. Most press, if you don't send a key, they're just not even, they're going to ignore you. They're not going to ask you for a key. They're going to move on to the next email. They get 100 emails a day. So you've got to make sure that your email has something interesting that makes them want to click. A lot of times I'll send an email, if you have an elevator pitch, put the elevator pitch in the subject line. If your elevator pitch is more than 10 or 15 words, it's probably too long. Get it to 10 or 15 words. So here's some resources that I found. I talked about Chris Zukowski. He's on Twitter. He runs howtomarketagame.com. He has a great mailing list. If you follow his Twitter, you can sign up for that mailing list. Simon Carless runs this Discovery News mailing list. It's pretty good. I found Chris's to be a little more tip driven for indies, whereas Simon's is got some pretty good metrics and things, but he's really starting to focus on that. So he may be posting a lot more cool stuff, and he posts more often actually than Chris also. Jake Burkett is another guy who is out there. He's an indie developer who has done a lot of research in this area in terms of things like coming up with some calculations to figure out the Boxleitner number that we talked about before, and then also some things like how to estimate like day one, week one, year one sales and stuff. I'm not going to get into all that because I feel like those numbers are interesting, but they can be misleading also. My experience has been sort of mixed with that, and most devs I talk to, they're somewhere on these spectrums, and they're interesting things to look at, but I don't know if they're really going to be super accurate for you. The other thing is Steamworks has now got a Twitter and a YouTube channel. If you're a Steam developer or potential Steam developer, I'd highly recommend following them on both of those. They have a lot of great videos. SteamDB is another good resource. Has some good stats on followers, concurrent players on Steam. You can actually see followers over time, which is kind of cool. So you can kind of look at a game and see how did they build up this list of followers. If they have 10,000 followers, how did this happen? Where did was it really slow trickle over time, or did they get a big boost from getting an article somewhere or something like that? Another new site that's being developed is this Game Data Crunch, which kind of pulls data from a lot of different places and kind of gives you some interesting reports. I found it's pretty new, so maybe something that's going to be improved a lot over time, but I already had some interesting things. Specifically, you could look at things like you could look at two games and see the tags they have in common, see reviewers they have in common, things like that. So it is pretty interesting. I think there's a lot of cool stuff there, but it may take some time for you to kind of go